Clara Ashford smoothed the same ivory glove she had smoothed 100 times that evening, straightened her back against a chair that had long since memorized the shape of her resignation, and surveyed the Pemberton ballroom with the practiced composure of someone who had decided, several years ago, to stop expecting anything from it. She was 26. She had attended this particular assembly or one identical to it, in a room identical to this one for 5 consecutive seasons. Every autumn, her Aunt Millicent convinced her that this year would be different. Every autumn, Clara came, sat in the chair nearest the window, watched the room perform itself with great enthusiasm, and went home having danced with no one. She did not consider this a failure. She considered it an accurate assessment of the situation. "There is Lord Ashby," her aunt said, directing her fan with the strategic precision of a general. He looked this way twice.
He was looking at Miss Wentworth.
"Miss Wentworth is behind you."
I know. He was looking at her through me. It is a slightly different thing.
Aunt Millicent made the sound she always made at this juncture, somewhere between a sigh and a prayer, and redirected her attention toward the punch table. Clara smoothed her glove one final time and returned her gaze to the middle distance. She was thinking about a novel she had left open at home, at chapter 16, just before something interesting was about to happen. She thought about it with genuine longing. The ballroom was full in the way Pemberton balls always were, every invitation accepted, every guest present, the chandeliers doing their very best overhead and the orchestra doing slightly less than their best. The room smelled of candle wax and powder and the floral arrangement Lady Pemberton ordered for every occasion, as if continuity and gardenias might hold civilization together. Clara had nothing against any of it. She simply wished she were elsewhere. She had spent 5 years learning to be comfortable in her own company. It was one of the more practical things that period had taught her. Her father's death had come with a great many lessons. The estate was gone. The income reduced to what remained after the debts were settled. The Ashford name carrying now a shadow that people mentioned carefully, or not at all. She had learned which of her father's friends were friends, and which had only been present for the favorable weather. Most, she discovered, had only been present for the weather. She had reorganized her life accordingly. Smaller, honest. She had stopped asking rooms full of strangers for things they were unlikely to give. She was doing very well with this arrangement, right up until the moment the doors at the far end of the ballroom opened and the room changed. It changed the way rooms only change for certain people, not in sound but in posture. A collective and involuntary adjustment moved through the crowd. Shoulders turned, conversations paused and resumed at a different register. Near the orchestra, a young woman leaned toward her companion. At the punch table, Lord Ashby straightened his cravat for no apparent reason. Clara noticed the adjustment before she identified the cause. Edmund Blackwood, Duke of Wrenfield, stood at the entrance to the ballroom. He was not what she had expected. She had heard the word feared applied to him with some regularity, a word that usually preceded men who wore their severity like theater. What she saw was a man simply standing in a doorway, deciding whether to stay. He was tall, dark-haired, dressed without excess. He wore no expression she could interpret, which, in a room full of people wearing carefully rehearsed expressions, was itself a kind of statement. "Good heavens," her aunt breathed. "Wrenfield, he almost never comes to these things."
And yet?
His mother must have insisted. 2 years a widower, they say he barely leaves the estate.
Aunt Millicent?
I am merely providing context.
You are providing gossip. They are different things.
She watched him a moment longer. She could not quite prevent herself, and then returned her attention to her gloves. Men like the Duke of Wrenfield did not cross ballrooms to speak to women like Clara Ashford. This was 5 seasons of empirical observation. It was accurate. Which is precisely why she was entirely unprepared for the sound of deliberate footsteps stopping directly in front of her chair. She looked up. He was looking at her. Not at her aunt, who had gone so still she appeared to have stopped breathing. Not at the woman on Clara's left. At her with the direct, unhurried attention of a man who had aimed for a destination and arrived. Up close, she revised her assessment. He was not only tall, he was the kind of presence that reorganized the space around him the way a significant piece of furniture reorganizes a room. not imposing, simply there. His eyes were gray, attentive in a way that felt, depending on how one chose to experience it, either very flattering or very inconvenient.
Miss Ashford,
You know my name?
I made a point of learning it. I should tell you that I have been watching you for the better part of an hour.
Behind her, her aunt produced a sound that was probably joy.
That is a somewhat alarming thing to say.
Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but the architecture of one, visible if you were paying close attention.
Yes, I apologize. What I meant is that I noticed you were not performing.
Clara considered this. Around them, the room had adjusted, conversations continued at a different frequency. Heads had turned and been diplomatically returned to their previous positions. The social machinery was processing the anomaly of Wrenfield beside Miss Ashford. Clara decided to ignore all of it.
And you found that interesting.
I found it the most interesting thing in the room, which is not, I recognize, a particularly high bar this evening.
He looked at the chair beside her.
May I?
She gestured. He sat. What followed was 15 minutes that Clara would later classify, in the privacy of her own accounting, as the most disorienting conversation she had conducted in recent memory. He did not compliment her dress. He did not ask about the weather. He did not say anything that constituted the standard script for such occasions. He asked her what she was thinking when she stared at the wall. She told him the truth, that she had been thinking about a novel she had left open at home at chapter 16, and that she had been regretting it with increasing intensity all evening. He asked which novel. She told him. He said he had read it and had opinions, and asked hers. She gave them. He disagreed. She disagreed with his disagreement. He appeared genuinely pleased, in the manner of a man who had expected to disagree and found being disagreed with in return a welcome development.
You read fiction differently than most people.
I'm not certain how most people read fiction.
As if the characters' choices are the point. You seem to read it as if the consequences are the point.
Clara looked at him steadily.
Yes, I suppose I do.
He nodded, filing this away somewhere. She found that she did not mind being filed.
My father believed that you could tell everything about a person's character by what they did when no one expected consequences. That principles held in comfort were not principles, they were preferences. He was very firm on the subject.
He sounds like a man worth knowing.
The observation was made quietly. Without the careful social distance people usually maintained around the topic of her father, the slight withdrawal, the redirect to pleasanter subjects, the exhausting act of treating his memory as something that might shatter if touched directly.
He was.
A small silence opened between them, not uncomfortable, the kind of silence that occurs between two people who have agreed, without negotiation, that some things do not require translation. She was aware of the room watching. She was also aware that she did not care the way she usually cared. She seemed, for the first time in recent memory, to be occupying a different room entirely. Then Lady Pemberton materialized beside them, and the moment reorganized itself. Lady Pemberton had managed the social architecture of 3 counties for 30 years. She had very firm opinions about what ought to happen when a feared duke sat beside a forgotten young woman at one of her assemblies. Your Grace, her smile was immaculate. Miss Ashford has not yet danced this evening. It was phrased as an observation. It functioned as a directive. Blackwood looked at Clara. Something passed between them, recognition of the situation, and a shared decision about what to do with it.
Miss Ashford, would you do me the honor?
You are not obligated.
I am aware of that.
She took his hand. Before I tell you what happened on that dance floor, and I want to take just a moment. If this story is reaching you tonight, wherever you are, please press like. It tells me this kind of story is worth telling, and it helps more people find it. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it? I genuinely want to know. Leave it in the comments. Now back to the ballroom. The dance was a formal one, measured, prescribed, the kind designed by a century of Regency courtesy to enforce a precise and socially acceptable distance between two people. Hands gloved, steps exact, the full machinery of protocol arranged between them like a wall with excellent posture. It did not entirely function as a wall. She was aware of him in a way she had not been aware of anyone in years. His hand guided without directing a pressure that suggested rather than instructed. He watched her face rather than tracking the steps. He knew the steps well enough to ignore them, which meant ignoring them was a choice, which meant looking at her was also a choice, which was an entirely different matter from the ordinary business of dancing. She was also aware that the room was watching. In 5 years of attending Pemberton assemblies, she had never had reason to be watched while dancing. It was a strange sensation, not unpleasant, like wearing someone else's coat and finding it nearly fits. When the set ended, he guided her off the floor and toward the wrong corridor. Not wrong exactly. A passage between the main ballroom and the supper room, narrow, lamplit, briefly empty as the assembly reconstituted itself for the next set. The music became muffled here, present but distant, the way music sounds through a wall. Clara stopped. He stopped. They were perhaps 3 feet apart, which in a corridor is not very far.
You deliberately walked us here.
Yes.
Why?
He considered the question with the same unhurried attention he gave everything.
Because in there, I am being watched. And what I want to say to you is not something I want to become a performance.
Clara's pulse made a small, unauthorized decision. She ignored it.
What do you want to say?
He was quiet for a moment. She was beginning to learn the register of his silences. This one was not hesitation. It was selection. He was choosing exactly the words he wanted.
I did not come tonight for the assembly. I do not come to assemblies.
Clearly.
I came because my solicitor mentioned, some months ago, that a Miss Clara Ashford attended the Pemberton assembly each year without fail. I had been attempting, through every conventional channel, to arrange an introduction. Every avenue had closed.
You have been trying to meet me for months.
6 months.
Why?
The corridor was very quiet. The music drifted through the wall, a low, companionable sound.
Your father conducted himself, in every dealing I ever witnessed, with a precision and honesty I did not encounter again after he died. When he died, when what happened to him happened, I was in the north. I was informed too late. There was nothing to be done by the time I understood the situation. I have thought about that with some regularity for 5 years. Not with guilt exactly, with the dissatisfaction of a task left unfinished.
Clara felt the corridor tilt very slightly.
The task. What was the task?
To know whether you were all right, you appear to be.
I am. Reasonably.
Good.
A silence.
I'm glad.
She looked at him. She was very good at reading people she had needed to be. Good at identifying the texture of performance, the quality of warmth that was not quite warm enough to be real. What she saw looking at Edmund Blackwood in a lamplit corridor with the music drifting through the wall was someone telling the truth. It was so entirely unexpected that it made her reckless. She was not certain afterward which of them moved first. She suspected it was her. He kissed her back immediately, without hesitation, the unguarded response of someone who had not prepared one. It was brief. It was not brief enough. When she stepped back, the corridor was exactly as it had been, dim, quiet, the music still present beyond the wall, and absolutely nothing was the same.
I should return.
Yes.
Neither of them moved for 3 full seconds. Then they walked back into the ballroom, separately, without discussing it. She collected herself at the edge of the supper room, a glass of something cold, 3 deliberate breaths, a firm internal instruction to her own face to behave normally. She was managing reasonably well when Lord Halford appeared at her elbow. She knew him moderately well and liked him moderately less. He moved through rooms with the confidence of someone who had decided the world was performing for his benefit. His smile was always slightly ahead of whatever he was actually feeling. "Miss Ashford," he said pleasantly, "what a remarkable evening for you."
Good evening, Lord Halford.
Wrenfield was convincing. I will grant him that. I did not think he would actually go through with it. Clara set her glass down.
I beg your pardon.
"The wager," he said, tilting his head, kind, confiding, enjoying every precise second of it. Pembridge bet him £200 that he would not approach the most overlooked woman in the room. Wrenfield accepted. We were all watching, naturally. He was very good. He always is. The supper room rearranged itself around her. £200, the most overlooked woman in the room. She had been found not because of anything she was, not because of her father's honesty, not because of 6 months of attempted introductions. She had been found because she was the easiest person in the room to find.
I see.
Her voice came out level. She was proud of it. "I thought you ought to know," Halford said. "I always think people deserve to know the truth." He drifted away, still smiling. Clara stood in the supper room and did what she had learned to do in the years since the letters stopped arriving. She took the feeling and put it somewhere manageable where it could be contained while her face stayed composed. She had been ridiculous. 5 years she had kept herself small and careful and honest about what was available to her. One evening, one strange conversation, one corridor, and she had let herself. She found, to her mild surprise, that she was angry enough to do something about it. She found him at the far window, alone for the first time all evening, watching the garden below with the stillness of someone who had been anticipating that the night would eventually cost him something. He turned when she approached. Something in his expression settled, a sharp attentiveness, the look of someone who has been waiting for this conversation and recognizes that it has arrived.
Lord Halford was very informative.
He did not ask what Halford had said.
Tell me what he told you.
That Pembridge bet you £200 to approach the most overlooked woman in the room. That the room was watching, that all of it was arranged. Is any part of it true?
He held her gaze for a long moment. She watched something move across his face, a decision being made in real time about whether pride was worth the cost of what it would take from him.
Pembridge and I had a wager this evening. About cards. About whether he would fold before the 3rd round. He lost considerably. He has been unhappy about it since 9 o'clock.
That is not.
I know what it is not. I am telling you what it is. I did not approach you on a wager. I approached you because I have been attempting to do so for 6 months, and because every word I said to you in the corridor was the truth, all of it.
She searched his face. She was looking for the small signals, the slight delay, the eyes that move a fraction, the word chosen for ambiguity rather than accuracy. She found none of it. What she found was a man telling the truth. What she also found was 5 years of earned caution rising up with considerable force to tell her that this was exactly what it felt like when you were wrong about someone.
I would like to believe that.
But you don't.
I believe you believe it. I am less certain about the rest.
He was quiet.
I see.
His expression returned to something composed, steady. The face of someone who has been decided against before and has learned to allow it to happen without argument. She left him at the window. She collected her wrap. She sent word to her aunt, a message Aunt Millicent would receive and accept without question. She walked through the entrance hall with her back very straight and thought deliberately about the novel at chapter 16. She heard him before she turned. Not his footsteps, the quality of the entrance hall changing, the same shift in atmosphere she had first noticed in the ballroom. She kept her spine straight.
Miss Ashford.
He was holding something out to her, his card. On the reverse, handwriting that was rapid and a little forceful, the handwriting of urgency overriding elegance.
Pembridge's address. Go and ask him. He will tell you it was about cards. He will tell you because it is true and because he owes me something significant enough that he will not lie about it when asked directly. Ask anyone who was at the card table tonight. Ask anyone except Halford who was not there and who knows only what he chose to invent.
She looked at the card, then at him.
Why are you doing this?
Because I would rather you know the truth and decide against me on the basis of it than have you decide against me on the basis of what someone else arranged for you to hear. That is the only kind of decision I know how to respect.
She took the card. The carriage arrived. She got in. She did not look back. But she held the card in both hands the entire way home and looked at it twice in the dark, She thought about the quality of a man who, rather than defending himself with words, hands you the tools to check. She thought about it for 2 days. The first day was for anger at Halford, at herself, at the vulnerability of having lowered a guard she had spent years constructing. She channeled it into correspondence, into a second reading of chapter 16, and into 3 increasingly energetic walks around the square. The second day, she turned the evening over more carefully. The conversation in the ballroom, how it had moved at its own speed, indifferent to the social machinery surrounding it. The corridor, the kiss, and how he had kissed her back without hesitation. Not as someone who had been hoping she would, as someone who simply had, the way you respond to something true before you have had the chance to consider whether you should. His face at the window stayed with her, not caught, not defensive. Someone standing still while a decision is made about him, and permitting it because arguing would have been beneath what he believed he was owed. Halford's smile stayed with her too. The pleasure in it, how carefully he had arranged the telling enough truth borrowed from one situation, poured into another, to make it hold long enough to do damage. She turned the card over in her mind, the handwriting fast and urgent. No speech, no defense, just an address and the implication, look for yourself. She thought about a chair beside a window at the Pemberton assembly, year after year made comfortable enough to stay in, because leaving required hope, and hope had, in her experience, a memorable way of ending. She thought about a man who had spent 6 months looking for a way to ask if she was all right. On the morning of the 3rd day, she sat down to write a note. She wrote 3 sentences, crossed them out, wrote 4 more, crossed those out also. On the 4th attempt, she stopped writing altogether. She put her coat on and went herself. Lord Pembridge received her in a drawing room that suggested recent, enthusiastic entertaining. He was nursing a considerable hangover and an even more considerable wounded pride, and he confirmed everything with the frank directness of a man too irritated to be diplomatic. Yes, there had been a wager. It was about cards. He had lost badly. Anyone who claimed otherwise was... He stopped himself, glanced at her, and settled on the word confused. He wrote it in a note. He underlined it twice. Clara read the note on the pavement outside Pembridge's house while his footman held the door with professional indifference. She read it twice more. Then she stood there in the cold and thought about the things she had refused in her life because it was safer than being wrong. The distance she maintained because closeness had once cost her everything. She put the note in her coat pocket and went home. She sat at her writing desk for a long time. Then she put her coat back on. His townhouse was in the quieter part of Mayfair, the part that did not need to announce itself. Good stone, clean windows, no need to perform. A butler answered, assessed the situation with magnificent professional restraint, and showed her to a sitting room. The room was warm and lined with books and smelled faintly of good paper and coal smoke. Blackwood came in, still holding a letter. He stopped when he saw her.
Miss Ashford.
I went to see Pembridge.
And?
He confirmed everything. With underlining, he also described Halford with a word he then reconsidered, which told me rather a lot about both of them.
Blackwood set the letter on a side table with the careful deliberateness of a man trying not to show what he was feeling.
I owe you an apology. I believed him. For 2 days I believed something about you that was not consistent with anything else I had observed. I applied old evidence to a new situation where it did not belong. That is not caution. That is habit. And I am, generally speaking, more careful than that.
You had reason to be cautious.
I had old reasons, ones that belonged to other people, in other circumstances, and have been taking up space they were not entitled to. I would like, going forward, to be treated as someone capable of distinguishing between the two.
He looked at her for a long moment with those gray, attentive eyes.
I will endeavor to remember that. You are also permitted, occasionally, to be wrong.
I know. I don't especially enjoy it.
No, I noticed.
Something eased in her chest, a thing she had been carrying for 3 days, and perhaps considerably longer, and had not quite acknowledged until the moment she felt it release.
I also came because you mentioned my father, and you did not tell me how you knew him. I find that I would like to know.
Something moved in his expression. The look of a person for whom a subject still carries weight and who has been waiting without expectation to be asked.
That is a longer conversation.
I have no particular obligations this afternoon.
He looked at her. Then he gestured to the chair nearest the fire. She sat. He sat across from her, and after a moment, with the careful attention of someone who has been waiting 5 years to say something and has finally been invited, he began. I will not tell you everything that was said in that sitting room. Some of it belongs to them. What I will tell you is that they talked until the light in the windows changed, until the coals settled low in the grate, until the afternoon had quietly become evening without either of them noticing in time to do anything about it. And what I will tell you is this. There are people we dismiss because they arrive at the wrong moment, in the wrong framing, carrying a truth that has been arranged by someone who finds it useful to sound like something else entirely. And there are people we hold at arm's length because we have been burned before. The burns were real. The caution was reasonable. And somewhere inside the very reasonable caution we begin refusing things that are also real. Clara Ashford spent 5 years being careful with herself, which was wise. She spent one evening being reckless with herself, which was also wise. She spent 2 days being afraid of the recklessness, which was very human. And then she went to Pembridge's house and asked the question herself, which was the most important thing of all. You can always ask. I think about the card he gave her. The card with Pembridge's address, offered in an entrance hall while she was already leaving. Not a speech, not a defense. Just, here is where to look. I trust you to look. There is something in that, I think, that matters more than most of the grand gestures we imagine people ought to make for us. Have you ever held someone at arm's length because of something you later discovered wasn't true, a version of them built by someone else's telling? Or have you been the one held at a distance, waiting for someone to decide whether you were worth the risk? I would love to hear it, if you are willing to share. Leave it in the comments. It is the most ordinary kind of story there is, and somehow it never quite feels ordinary when it is yours. Thank you for being here. Until next time.